What if everything we know about ancient history is a cover story written to hide the ruins of a world so advanced, it makes our modern age look like finger painting on cave walls? Before the flood, there was tech that defied gravity, silenced pain, resurrected the dead, and bent time like thread. Not myths, not magic, machines, lost, buried, erased on purpose. This isn't just forgotten history. It's forbidden technology. And today, we're digging it all back up. These are the 49 lost pre-flood technologies that were impossible until they weren't. Levitation devices. The first stones were never lifted. They were persuaded. Imagine a world before cranes, before pulleys, before even the idea of brute force as a solution. Now imagine standing in that world, watching a 1,000-ton block of quarried stone rise from the earth, not dragged, not hoisted but floated. No ropes, no screams of exertion, just a humming sound in the air, like a swarm of bees singing in harmony. Then movement, graceful, impossible movement. Ancient legends from the Andes to the Himalayas speak in cryptic awe of men who could lift monoliths with the sound of drums. Tibetan monks, it said, would form a circle, beat gongs and chant in unison, causing rocks to levitate and soar. The Egyptian priesthood whispered of divine words that commanded stone. And in South America, the reclusive coral castle builder Edward Leedskalnin claimed to have rediscovered the secrets of the ancients, using magnetism and sound to move multi-ton blocks alone, at night, unseen. Skeptics scoff, as they should, because this is where evidence turns to smoke, but the smoke thick, persistent, never quite clears. It clings to legends of sound waves so precise they could counter gravity. Of frequencies that didn't just move matter, they seduced it into motion. Not brute force, resonance. What if the ancients weren't using tools to move rock but the very laws of the universe? It sounds like fantasy, until you realize. Modern physics flirts with the same ideas. Acoustic levitation, magnetic suspension, anti-gravity propulsion. We're not inventing these things, we're stumbling toward them, one rediscovery at a time. And yet, we still can't explain how the Baalbek stones were positioned, or how the Great Pyramid's interior blocks fit so tightly you can't slip a razor blade between them. Maybe those ancients didn't struggle with stone at all. Maybe they just asked it nicely. And if they could lift stone with sound, what else could they command? Atmospheric manipulators. First came the sky. Then came the hand that twisted it. Long before Doppler radars and cloud-seeding planes, the skies themselves were said to obey, no, respond to ancient commands. Myths scattered across pre-flood narratives describe devices that didn't just read the weather, they wrote it. Instruments that whispered to clouds, stirred oceans into fury, and drew lightning down like obedient dogs. In the Sumerian flood myth, it wasn't nature's wrath that caused the great deluge, it was a divine decision, an engineered event, a controlled demolition of humanity. Flood stories in nearly every ancient culture hint at the same theme: someone turned on the faucet, and sometimes they forgot to turn it off. So what were these devices? Atmospheric harmonizers? Cloud disruptors? Tesla coils born too soon? Stories tell of staffs held by gods that summoned rain on command. Orbs that glowed with inner fire and changed the winds. Even the Ark of the Covenant, some speculate, could discharge energy powerful enough to split the sky. If that's not weather control, what is? It all sounds like mysticism until you look up. Because today, cloud seeding is real. Directed energy weapons are no longer sci-fi. HARP exists. We are, in crude ways, walking the path backward. But if we're just now figuring this out, what did they already know? And more importantly, why did they stop? Some say the atmospheric manipulators were destroyed to keep power from falling into reckless hands. Others believe the devices are still here, buried beneath the polar ice, sleeping in the Mariana Trench, or sealed beneath desert sand, silent, waiting. But one question remains, hanging in the air like ozone before a storm. If ancient hands could twist the skies, could they fly? Vimanas, flying machines, they didn't flap, they roared. The ancient Sanskrit texts don't stutter. They describe Vimanas in shocking detail, flying palaces of iron, fire, spewing engines, craft capable of interstellar travel, aerial dogfights, and mid-air explosions so bright they outshone 1,000 suns. Not metaphor, description. These machines weren't chariots of fire in the poetic sense. They were blueprints in disguise. In the Mahabharata and the Vaimanika Shastra, we read of vertical takeoffs, anti-gravity propulsion, mercury vortex engines. One passage even details the use of onboard radar, and it was written thousands of years before the Wright brothers ever got their hands greasy. Skeptics dismiss these as mythological flights of fancy. But how do we explain global consistency? Ancient Mesoamerican art features eerily aerodynamic sky gods. Egyptian reliefs depict what look like helicopters and planes. Aboriginal Australian legends speak of sky serpents made of metal. Coincidence? Or shared memory? And here's the kicker. Some of these accounts mention how the technology was lost, that the knowledge was too dangerous, that wars between sky nations left the earth scorched and broken, that the machines were buried on purpose. Maybe we didn't lose this tech. Maybe we were forced to forget it. Today, governments spend billions chasing hypersonic flight, stealth drones, and orbital supremacy. But what if the future isn't forward? What if it's buried under a temple in India, etched in stone and hiding in plain sight? Because if the ancients could master the skies, maybe they also mastered something even more dangerous. Time itself, instantaneous materialization, dematerialization. Blink and it's gone. Or maybe it never was. In the murkiest corners of myth, where physics starts to sweat and logic begins to twitch, we find the idea that ancient beings could make objects appear or vanish at will. Entire temples, cities, armies blinked in and out of existence like poorly rendered textures in an open-world game. Instantaneous materialization and dematerialization, not metaphor, literal disappearance. In the ancient texts, the gods didn't just teleport they unexisted things. The Vedas mention beings that would vanish into the ether, taking matter with them. The Book of Enoch describes watchers who came and went, like shadows dissolving in flame. In the Popol Vuh, divine twins disappear, reappear, and morph into celestial bodies, often leaving behind nothing but disturbed air. Science fiction today calls it teleportation, beam me up, Star Trek stuff. But what if that fantasy was someone else's reality? Long before we even coined the word quantum. Let's think small subatomic. Today, we know that particles can tunnel through barriers, exist in multiple states, pop in and out of virtual existence. So what happens when a civilization unlocks this understanding at scale? Not for electrons, but for elephants? Some theorists whisper about dimensional overlays, suggesting ancient engineers didn't just destroy matter, they moved it between realities, like shoving a file into a different folder just with mountains. Crazy? Maybe. But there are accounts fragmented, mythologized of cities that appeared overnight and vanished just as fast. Castles in the clouds, towers that flickered between visible and invisible, ships that phased in from nowhere, left scorched earth, and vanished again. Perhaps these weren't divine illusions. Perhaps they were ancient upload protocols. And if you can erase matter with a whisper, what stops you from rewriting it? Molecular restructuring. Lead into gold, flesh into fire, stone into air. The dream of the alchemist was never just wealth, it was control. The total domination of matter, one atom at a time. But where medieval Europe groped blindly with mercury and symbols, Older hands may have danced through molecules like a pianist across keys. Molecular restructuring. The power to alter the atomic structure of anything. Think transmutation, think creation, think destruction by design. Ancient legends hint at more than metaphor. In Mesopotamian lore, the gods create humans from clay mixed with breath. But what if that's not clay, but base matter restructured at the molecular level? In Egyptian myth, Thoth writes spells that change the nature of things. In the East, tales abound of monks who could turn a rock into a meal, or walk through walls by shifting their body's essence. Modern chemistry shrugs. Not possible, they say, even as we flirt with nanotech and programmable matter. But what if the ancients had already cracked it? Imagine a civilization with machines capable of reading molecular signatures and rewriting them on command. Want clean water? Restructure salt? Need a sword? Pull iron from sand? Out of food? Tell the machine what you're hungry for. Heaven's 3D printer. It's a terrifying elegance. No supply chain, no scarcity, just infinite transformation. And if that kind of power existed, no wonder it vanished. A single tantrum could unravel reality. No bombs needed, just a command line. And there's an eerie silence around this concept. It's too potent, too final. It collapses the boundary between science and magic, turning the entire universe into editable code. And if you can rewrite matter, how long before you rewrite mind? Consciousness transfer devices. You are not your body. Not if the ancients were right. Somewhere between reincarnation and reincarnation with USB support lies a terrifying possibility: consciousness transfer. The idea that who you are, memories, soul, self, can be extracted, stored, and moved. And not just once. Across lifetimes. This isn't possession, this is precision. Ancient stories hint at it like shadows under torchlight. Egyptian pharaohs were buried with elaborate rituals not just for the afterlife, but for potential return. Tibetan monks speak of tulkus, reincarnated lamas who choose their next body. The Bhagavad Gita flirts with the idea of consciousness as independent from form. And deep in Gnostic and Hermetic texts, there are mentions of vessels that can hold the light of man. What if those vessels were mechanical? Imagine a room in a mountain, a crystal throne. You sit, you close your eyes, and when you open them, you are elsewhere. New body, same you. Science fiction has caught up, calling it mind uploading. But the ancients? They seem to treat it like maintenance, a cosmic oil change. Swap the shell, keep the driver. This changes everything. It means the same beings could have ruled for millennia, not immortal, just mobile. It means ancient wisdom may not be lost, it may just be waiting for the right hardware. And most unsettling of all, it means that memory, your sense of I, might just be a file waiting to be copied, or worse, hacked. And if you could jump between lifetimes, who's to say you couldn't jump through time itself? Time viewing, manipulation devices. You're not supposed to see time. You're supposed to feel it. 1 second, then another, a metronome of inevitability, ticking forward like a death march in formal wear. But what if someone hacked the metronome? In the hushed corners of pre-flood myth, there are whispers of device artifacts, machines, portals that didn't just show time, but bent it. Time viewing, time manipulation. A power so absurd it borders on theological blasphemy, and yet, nearly every ancient culture hints at someone or something doing exactly that. In the ancient Zoroastrian texts, a mirror is said to reflect the all-seeing wheel, allowing priests to witness events across time. The Book of Enoch describes a crystalline vault in heaven where all history past and future is recorded. The Hindu Puranas? They talk of sages who step into caves and emerge centuries later, unchanged. Time didn't pass for them. It folded. Were these metaphorical journeys? or the careful documentation of impossible machines. Imagine a room filled with resonant crystal. You sit, surrounded by symbols older than writing. The room hums. Suddenly, you're not here anymore. You're watching your ancestors walk among the monoliths. Or maybe you're glimpsing a future where cities are vertical jungles and humans speak in light. You're not just seeing time, you're browsing it. And maybe editing it. If such technology existed, its implications are obscene. Change a single moment, and you rewrite entire bloodlines. Erase a tyrant, insert a genius, hack causality itself. This isn't sci-fi. It's God mode. And maybe that's why it's gone. Because if time was once a tool, it quickly became a weapon. But there's a pattern here. These myths don't talk about time manipulators as heroes. They warn of them. They are always punished, always hunted, always buried. Which begs the question, if someone once had control of time and lost it, who took it? Anti-gravity generators. It wasn't just about going up. It was about letting go. Ancient architecture mocks modern physics. Consider the 1,200-ton stones at Baalbek, the megalithic terracing at Sacsayhuaman, the seamless joints of Machu Picchu. Either the ancients had superhuman patience or they had anti-gravity generators humming under their sandals. Not theoretical, not poetic, actual technology that canceled gravity like flipping a switch. Legends across continents describe floating stones, levitating palaces, ships that hung in the sky. In the ancient Indian epics, the gods traveled in chariots that defied the weight of the world. Native American myths speak of sky lodges anchored by invisible threads. In Africa, certain stones were said to sing before they rose. All of it points to a forgotten science that made gravity optional. Think about the implications. With anti-gravity, transport becomes trivial, construction becomes play, borders become jokes, civilization becomes vertical. A tower into the clouds? Try a city above the clouds. Modern science dabbles in this: superconductors, magnetic fields, quantum weirdness, but always in a lab, always with wires and disclaimers. Nothing close to what the ancients were allegedly doing in the open air, using nothing but tuned frequency, crystalline matrices, and geometry that makes mathematicians twitch. And maybe they didn't just cancel gravity. Maybe they bent it, redirected it, focused it into beams and waves. Control gravity, and you control mass, energy, inertia. You control motion itself. So what happened? Did the machines overload? Was the tech stolen? Or was it too easy, too tempting to use it for war? Because if you can lift a stone, you can lift a soldier. And if you can lift a soldier, you can lift an army. And drop it anywhere. But that kind of control requires another power one, even more dangerous. Control over the land itself. Terraforming engines. First came the floods. Then came the builders of mountains. Terraforming is a word we now reserve for science fiction. Something future Mars colonists will try with mirrors and bacteria. But the past might have done it better. Faster, louder. The myths of the pre-flood world don't describe people who adapted to nature. They describe beings who rewrote it. Rivers bent like ribbon, mountains conjured in weeks. Forests sprouted overnight, deserts erased by dawn. Machines that reshape the earth not over millennia, but during lunch. Look closer at ancient tales, and the evidence hides in plain sight. Sumerian gods create valleys with scepters of vibration. Hindu deities wield arrows that crack open mountains. In Norse mythology, giant smiths forge the very shape of continents. And in the Old Testament, divine wrath doesn't just drown the wicked, it reshapes the planet. Terraforming wasn't theoretical. It was personal. Now, imagine the tech. Giant underground engines, crystal harmonizers, geothermal pulse emitters, a mesh of stone, sound, and energy that could cause a tectonic shrugger build a temple platform in a day. The ancients didn't ask permission from nature. They reprogrammed it. And maybe they overdid it. Maybe that's why the flood myths are everywhere. Not punishment, just overflow. And if someone once had the power to mold mountains and rivers to their will, how, long before they tried molding language itself? Universal translators. Mental, device-based. They understood everything. Not just speech, not just written script, everything. From the rustle of reeds in Babylon to the chants of Mayan priests, from the shrieks of birds to the silent thoughts of strangers, the ancient world, we are told, was once united by something far more powerful than trade or treaties, perfect understanding. Enter the universal translator. But not the clunky headset version you'd expect from sci-fi. This was something deeper, smarter, possibly alive. Some say it was a device, worn like an amulet, that let the wearer comprehend any tongue. Others believe it was an internal upgrade, activated through ritual, genetics, or technology now long forgotten. But the result was the same: communication without confusion, minds speaking to minds. The myths are full of clues. In Genesis, humanity once shared a single language before the Tower of Babel shattered it all. The fall wasn't just about pridate, was about dividing the code. The Hindu god Saraswati gave sages the ability to understand animals, plants, even the elements. The Dogon people of Mali claim their ancestors could speak to stars. The implication? That language was once not a limitation but a superpower. And it makes sense. A civilization trying to conquer the globe or build a global harmony would need perfect communication. Not just for diplomacy, but for construction, medicine, science. And beyond language, imagine the potential. Reading emotions with precision, hearing truth layered beneath lies, understanding not just what was said, but what was meant. Modern tech dreams of this AI translation, neurolinguistics, even brain-to-brain communication experiments. But we're still crawling, compared to the mythical elegance of a world where no word was foreign, where even silence spoke volumes. Then, like all the great tools of the ancients, it vanished. Maybe the translators stopped working. Maybe they were dismantled in purpose, because when every mind is open, every thought accessible, privacy dies, secrets dissolve, and power, once centralized, becomes impossible to hide. And if you could understand everyone, maybe you could also heal everyone. Or better yet, make them heal themselves. Perfect, self-healing technology. Pain was once optional. That's what the stories suggest. That long before stitches and scalpels, before pills and prosthetics, there was a kind of healing that didn't fix the body, it restored it, perfectly, instantly. Self-healing technology. No hospitals, no doctors, just recovery. Triggered like a reflex. Legends across the world speak of elixirs and fountains, crystals and chambers, relics that renewed the flesh or regrew the limb, the Greek ambrosia, the Hindu amrita, the Norse Idun's apples. But what if these weren't symbolic of vitality? What if they were mechanisms? Imagine a small orb, humming with bioresonant frequencies. Touch it to a wound, tissue reknits, bones realign, nerves reconnect. Or a chamber that scans you, detects internal trauma, and simply rewinds your biology to a moment before injury. No pain, no scarring, no aging. The idea isn't just magical, it's threatening. A world where no one dies from injury, where war loses its sting, where aging isn't a certainty, but a setting. It means diseases would have no host. Viruses, no victory, the balance of nature broken. And maybe that's why it disappeared. If every human could self-repair, then death itself becomes elective, and with no mortality, where does meaning go? Perhaps the ancients feared that too much life would lead to madness, or perhaps only a select few ever had access. A ruling class of immortals, jealously guarding their regenerative tech while the rest of the world bled. And when you can heal the body instantly, why not go deeper? Why not heal the mind? Or, more dangerously, rewrite it? Dreamweavers, memory implanters. Reality is fragile. Memory, even more so. Now imagine a tool ancient, invisible, precise that can plant a thought, rewrite a past, fabricate a trauma, or erase one entirely. Not hypnosis, not suggestion, technology, machinery. A dreamweaver. The ancients didn't call them that, of course. They spoke of gods who visited in dreams, who gifted visions that changed destinies. They told of shamans who could enter your sleep and leave messages. They warned of creatures who fed on false memories, demons of the dreamscape. But behind the poetry lies the possibility of control, absolute, inescapable mental programming. What if temples weren't places of prayer, but servers for shared dream experiences? You enter, lie down, close your eyes, and wake up with a different belief. A new mission, a changed personality. No force needed, just a script implanted into your sleep. And the tech? Perhaps it was crystalline matrices, neuro-resonant frequencies, devices that synced with the brain's rhythms and gently hijacked REM, or helmets that pulsed with fractal light and spoke directly to the subconscious. The implications are chilling. This wasn't just mind reading, it was mind writing. Indoctrination on a cellular level. Need to sway a population? Don't send armies, send dreams. Need a spy? Plant a memory they think is real. Need a god? Create a vision and make the dream universal. And if you could change what people remember, you could change who they are. It's the final frontier of tyranny, not chains, but choices that were never truly yours. But perhaps someone remembered the truth. Perhaps someone woke up. And what did they find when they dug beneath their dreams? Cities. But not the ones on maps. The ones below. Subterranean city generators. They didn't dig. They unveiled. Hidden beneath feet and centuries, the ancients are said to have built cities not above the earth, but within it. Not caves, not tunnels, cities, with roads, chambers, ventilation systems, light, warmth, power, entire civilizations buried on purpose, and not by accident or catastrophe but by design. The myths don't whisper, they scream this truth. Shambhala, Agartha, Patala. Realms of light and knowledge beneath the surface, accessed by the worthy, forgotten by the world. These weren't metaphorical paradises. They were engineering marvels. Entire ecosystems turned inward. So how were they built? With subterranean city generators, machines, engines, or possibly sentient constructs that could carve, bore, structure, and furnish massive underground complexes with mechanical precision. Not over centuries. Overnight. Picture it. A device the size of a small tower lowered into bedrock. It hums. The stone around it begins to shift, rearranged atom by atom. Walls form, floors level themselves. Air ducts shape into spiral lungs. Crystals are embedded in the ceiling solar simulators. Water flows, pulled from aquifers. In a day, a sanctuary is born. In a week, a metropolis. And these weren't bunkers for hiding. They were palaces, holy sites, research labs, or maybe escape hatches. Because if the surface was unpredictable weather, warfare, watchers from the sky, the underworld offered silence, control, continuity. But like every miracle, the tech vanished, or worse, it closed the door behind itself. The entrances lost, the machines deactivated, Or perhaps, still running, still digging. Today, we stumble across hints, forgotten caverns too symmetrical to be natural, air shafts that go nowhere until you follow them long enough. And if you can build a city underground, you need a power source to sustain it. Something clean, something ancient, something crystalline. Crystal energy resonators. They didn't use oil, they used harmony. Crystal energy resonators weren't batteries, they were symphonies, devices that channeled vibrational energy through precisely cut crystal matrices, transforming resonance into raw power, light, heat, propulsion, even life force. Ancient ruins are littered with clues, temples aligned with magnetic ley lines, obelisks capped with quartz, pyramids that hum at the right frequency. All over the globe. The architecture sings if you know how to listen. In Atlantis, as legend goes, power flowed from a central crystal. Not metaphor, a literal, titanic prism that absorbed cosmic energy and beamed it across the continent. In Mesoamerica, crystal skulls were said to hold both memory and might. And in Egypt? The Great Pyramid may have been a power station, not a tomb, its chambers, shafts, and granite blocks forming an acoustic generator of staggering scale. These weren't rocks. They were engines. Imagine plugging into the earth itself, tapping into its heartbeat, its resonance, no pollution, no combustion, just pure frequency, refined and focused through crystals grown, not mined. And these resonators didn't just power lights, they powered minds. Healing centers used specific tones to rejuvenate the body. Oracles received visions channeled through harmonized frequencies. Entire cities may have functioned not just with electrical current, but with vibrational cohesion. It explains the obsession with sound, why certain mantras were guarded, why chants echoed through stone halls carved to precise acoustic measurements. They weren't being mystical, they were being technical. And when the crystals cracked, so did the world. Because a broken resonator doesn't just stop working, it distorts, it destabilizes. Perhaps that's what brought Atlantis down. Not water, not war. Feedback. And if you can use sound to power a city, what happens when you use it to destroy? Sonic disintegrators. First, silence. Then, obliteration. Imagine a weapon that doesn't fire bullets or beams but sound. Raw, focused vibration that can disassemble matter, shatter bone, liquefy steel. The sonic disintegrator. A tool so elegant, so horrifying, it leaves no burn marks, just dust. Ancient texts murmur of weapons that sang enemies to death, that struck cities with invisible waves, causing structures to collapse without flame. In Hindu epics, divine weapons caused the heavens to tremble with a single chant. In Tibet, monks used harmonics to move and possibly fracture stone. This wasn't mystical war, it was sonic engineering. The weapon itself might have looked like a staff, a horn, a tuning fork, carried by gods, wielded by kings, simple in appearance, catastrophic in use. Science nods nervously. We know sound can kill. High-frequency waves rupture organs. Sonic weapons have been developed for crowd control. But the ancients weren't stopping protests, they were vaporizing armies. And maybe these weren't just weapons. Maybe they were tools. Need a doorway through a mountain? Sing it open. Need a tunnel, a quarry, a sculpture? Just adjust the pitch. No chisel required, just the right note. But the danger was exponential. A slip in frequency, and a city crumbles. A vibration too high, and your own body turns against you. And so, they vanished. Or were hidden. Because in the wrong hands, a melody becomes a massacre. And maybe that's when someone said, enough with destruction. Let's build something better. Let's build the perfect human. Genetic perfection chambers. Forget evolution. The ancients had an upgrade button. Tales of the ancient world don't just describe powerful civilizations, they describe perfect beings, towering, radiant, ageless, capable of feats no modern human could attempt, the sons of gods, the shining ones, the titans. Were they born that way? Or were they engineered? Enter the genetic perfection chamber, more myth than machine, more legend than lab. But everywhere you look, the implications whisper beneath the surface. A technology designed not to heal the body but to improve it, enhance strength, expand cognition, extend life, erase flaw, redesign the human blueprint from the ground up. Ancient texts don't use our terminology, but they tell the story. In Sumerian lore, the Anunnaki create humanity in stages, refining the model. In Egyptian myth, the gods sculpt the Ka and Bay, the energetic blueprints of man. In the Book of Enoch, watchers taught the secrets of the body and bred offspring so powerful the world could not contain them. These weren't accidents of nature. They were projects. Picture the chamber, a glowing pod carved from obsidian, humming with low frequencies, infused with biocrystals. You lie inside, lights scan your DNA, faults are corrected. Muscle density increased, neural pathways multiplied. You wake up, new. Better. Immortal? Maybe. But perfection is a moving target, and the cost of chasing it is always everything. Perhaps that's why these chambers were buried, hidden. Perhaps their use led to beings too powerful, too unstable. Perhaps the last ones were destroyed when one perfect creation tried to play God. But what if one chamber survived? And what if someone's already inside it? And if you can perfect the body, why not bypass it altogether? Teleportation gates, devices. They didn't walk. They vanished. In the pre-flood age, distance wasn't a limitation. It was a suggestion. The ancients didn't move from place to place, they jumped, not in metaphor, in geography. Teleportation, the instantaneous transfer of matter across vast stretches of space, and sometimes, not just space, across reality. Nearly every myth culture has a version. Norse Bifrost, the rainbow bridge to the gods. The Egyptian sunboat, carrying Ra across worlds. The wormholes of ancient Tibet. Hindu devas stepping between realms like rooms. Even Native American traditions speak of stone portals that sang when activated. So how did they work? Some suggest rings of stone megaliths aligned to stars were part of a planetary grid. Reactivated with sound, light, or energy, they opened doorways. Others speak of crystals tuned to vibrational signature deal the right frequency, and you don't just move, you disappear. This wasn't science fiction. This was sacred logistics. Need to get from Lemuria to Babylon? Step through the gate. Need to escape a flood, a battle, a collapsing empire? Walk into a monolith and emerge on another continent. But it came at a cost. Teleportation isn't just about where you go, it's about where you shouldn't. Some say these gates didn't just connect earthly places but opened rifts to other dimensions, realms of chaos, of light, of void. And sometimes, things came through. So they were sealed, smashed, buried under temples and oceans. And yet, sometimes they still activate. People vanish. And if you can vanish your body, maybe you can protect it too. Even after death, personal force fields. Nothing touched them. Not arrows, not flame, not time. The ancients had something better than armor. They had aura, not in the spiritual sense, but literal shimmering barriers of energy, projected from the body or worn like invisible cloaks. Personal force fields, a forgotten shield tech that turned mythic heroes into walking fortresses. The descriptions are everywhere, just coded in poetry. Heroes wrapped in light, gods untouched by blade. Warriors who fought for days without a scratch. What if those weren't metaphors for skill but tech that bent reality around them? These force fields weren't made of metal, they were energetic, tuned to the individual's frequency. Think plasma, shaped by thought. Think magnetism, wrapped around flesh. Or maybe something we don't even have words for yet. Artifacts may have helped a belt, a bracelet, a gem embedded in the chest. Once activated, the field would neutralize projectiles, disperse heat, even absorb kinetic force. Invincibility, not through avoidance, but resonance. They weren't just defensive either. Some fields deflected psychic attacks, some silenced sound, some allowed wearers to walk through storms without so much as a raindrop touching them. And, of course, they disappeared. Some say the fields fed off ambient energy, and when the resonator grid fell, they flickered out. Others think the tech still exists but only responds to certain genetics. You can wear the device, but if your DNA's not right, it's just jewelry. But imagine this: a soldier with no fear, a priest who cannot be burned, a child who walks through fire laughing. And just as the world starts to realize what power protection really meant, we find out what built the places they protected. Automated construction drones, ancient version. They didn't build with their hands. They directed. The towering monuments, impossible cities, and seamless stone blocks of the ancient world all point toward one maddening truth. Someone or something was doing the heavy lifting, not slaves. Not ropes and ramps, machines. Autonomous, tireless, silent, ancient construction drones. Picture them not as clunky modern robots, but elegant beings of bronze and crystal, hovering spheres, spider-like automatons, golem-esque creatures shaped from alloys we can't replicate. Self-replicating builders that obeyed commands, read blueprints encoded in sacred symbols, and manifested temples in days instead of decades. The myths, again, leave clues. The golems of Jewish folklore mudmen animated by divine letters. The dactyls of Greek myth-metallic beings who helped forge and construct under the god's command. In India, legends speak of celestial beings who built palaces in the sky overnight. The Egyptian Shabti figures, tiny servant statues, were said to work for the dead in the afterlife. Metaphor or memory? And what if these drones weren't just laborers but designers? Machines that not only obeyed but understood. They worked with anti-gravity devices, levitation fields, and sonic tools to assemble cyclopean architecture we still struggle to explain. No hammer marks, no misaligned stones. Every piece set with eerie precision. They didn't just follow orders, they anticipated them. And then they vanished. Or worse, they're still here, slumbering in sealed vaults beneath the earth, waiting for a language no one speaks anymore. And if they once obeyed human architects, what would they do now? Who would they recognize as master? But even with perfect machines, you'd still need a perfect mind. Or maybe a device to make it perfect. Psychic amplification helmets. They didn't think harder. They broadcast. To rule a civilization with forgotten tech, you needed more than muscle. You needed mind, not average human cognition, but something enhanced, expanded, amplified. Enter the psychic amplification helmeta crown, not of gold, but of influence. The concept is whispered across traditions. Helms that granted vision, crowns that spoke with gods, headgear that could bend wills, move objects, foresee fate. These weren't just symbols of power, they were power. Imagine a device forged from rare metals, laced with crystalline filaments, humming with encoded frequency. You wear it, and your thoughts aren't just yours anymore. They project. You can influence emotion, read intention, move objects without touch, commune with other minds, access layers of consciousness usually locked behind the walls of biology. Shamans might have worn crude versions feathered and adorned with sacred gems devices misunderstood as ceremonial when they were actually functional. The Oracle of Delphi inhaled vapors. But what if those were neural triggers, activated by a worn headpiece? Pharaohs wore golden headdresses shaped to their skulls maybe, for more than pomp. Maybe they were keys. These helmets didn't just boost psychic potential, they trained it. They tuned the mind to higher planes. Like tuning forks for the soul, they turned thoughts into instruments. Some were said to unlock the eye, enabling one to see across space, time, and soul. Of course, they were dangerous. Amplify the wrong mind, and you don't get peace, you get tyranny. Thought becomes law, doubt becomes rebellion, and in the hands of the deranged, apocalypse. So they were hidden, or dismantled, or they self-destructed when misused. But perhaps one or two still hum in deep silence, waiting for a mind calm enough to wear them. And what powered those helmets? Not blood, not fire, something older. Etheric energy harvesters. They drank from the invisible ocean. Not oil, not steam, not sunlight, something subtler, purer, the ether, an unseen energy field woven through space, matter, and mind, a limitless source of power. And the ancients, if legend holds, knew how to tap it like water from a well. Etheric energy harvesters weren't just generators, they were bridges, devices designed to pull energy from the universal subterranean ambient potential, the life force spoken of in every ancient culture. Chi, prana, akasha, ruach, organon, names differ, function remains. These devices appeared in myth as staves, towers, stones, or even clothing. The Ark of the Covenant radiated divine power. The Egyptian Benben stone glowed with unknown force. Vedic texts describe flying ships powered by mercurial vortexes, absorbing energy from the breath of space. The tech likely used sacred geometry, rotating magnetic fields and piezoelectric crystals. No wires, no circuits, just form and function merged into harmony. And they didn't just power cities. They powered people. Standing near one could restore health, raise consciousness, even trigger visions. The body became a battery, the soul became a signal, and civilization for a time was luminous. But power invites abuse. If you could draw infinite energy from nowhere, what would stop you from draining everything? The field itself could be destabilized, planetary resonance thrown into chaos, earthquakes, madness, implosions. And so the harvesters were turned off, sealed, dismantled, or, in the worst cases, buried under mountains. But energy leaves traces, and someday, someone might find the frequency again. What happens when you become invisible? When the light, the energy, the very eyes of the world pass through you like mist? Invisibility cloaks, devices. They were there, and then they weren't. The ancient world is haunted by figures that vanish in plain sight, not by fleeing, not by running, but by disappearing. Legends echo with stories of cloaks that erased the wearer from vision, artifacts that bent light or dissolved form. Invisibility, not as myth, but as technology. Cloaks of mist in Celtic lore, veils of Maya in Hinduism, helmets of darkness worn by Greek gods, all speak of a truth too bizarre to be symbolic. That the ancients wielded devices, garments, crystals, perhaps even skin-tight suits that could distort reality at the visual level. How? It starts with frequency. Light is just vibration. Bend it, shift it, and the eye sees what you want or nothing at all. The ancients knew this. Their myths don't talk about magic invisibility. They talk about folded light, shadows that walk, and bodies turned to wind. Imagine a device that surrounds the user in a field of refraction, redirecting every incoming photon around them. No shimmer, no blur, just absence, an empty space that moves. Cloaks woven from metallic threads, helmets etched with sigils that acted like optical keys, rings that vibrated the wearer out of the visible spectrum. Invisibility wasn't always for stealth. Sometimes it was ritual, priests entering the spirit world, initiates walking unseen among crowds, kings disappearing from battle not by retreating, but by slipping out of sight. And then there's the terrifying flip side. What if it wasn't just people using the tech? What if cities were hidden? Devices, entire complexes, entire histories, cloaked in a resonance field so complete that we've walked right past them? It would explain a lot. And if you can disappear your body, why not store your mind? Consciousness. Uploading facilities. Not reincarnation. Reinstallation. Somewhere in the flood myths and creation stories, there's a quiet horror that the soul is not only eternal, but transferable, not in the religious sense, but in the technical. The idea that your mind memories, identity, essence could be extracted, stored, and reinstalled into a new host. Consciousness uploading. This wasn't a dream to the ancients. It was a system. Myths describe crystal libraries, sacred mirrors, vaults of light codes. Egyptian priests performed rites of Ka anchoring. Tibetan lamas remembered past lives in perfect detail. Were they spiritually advanced or just plugged into something? Imagine a Chambera dark space pulsing with resonance. You step in, your body relaxes. A light scans your cortex. Thought by thought, neuron by neuron, your identity is digitized. Stored not in silicon, but in living crystal. You leave the chamber, someone else enters. And when they open their eyes, they're you. Some stories say this was voluntary. Others whisper of souls taken, trapped in vessels, used for wisdom or control. And maybe it wasn't just about preserving identity. Maybe it was mobility. Immortals jumping between bodies, a council of ancient minds inhabiting fresh hosts every century. Rulers that never died, they just rebooted. So, where are these facilities now? Hidden, destroyed, or worse still, online, forgotten in underground temples, scanning empty rooms for minds to copy. But if a million voices once shared a single network, what kind of conversations could they have without speaking? Global communication network, pre-internet. No wires, no satellites. But the message was clear. Long before Morse code, before fiber optics, before radio towers clawed at the sky, the ancient Sif, you believe the myth shed, a global communication network, not analog, not digital, energetic. A system that connected minds, continents, and perhaps even species through frequency alone. Think telepathy, but structured. They called it the net of Indra, the web of voices, the dreamline. It wasn't myth, it was infrastructure. Built into temples, pyramids, obelisks, every sacred site was a node. Every crystal, a transmitter. Every chant, a password. Messages weren't written. They were felt, shared dreams, sudden insights. A king in Babylon receives a warning the same night. A priest in Mesoamerica sees the same symbol. A shepherd in Tibet hums a melody last sung in ancient Ireland. This wasn't coincidence. This was connection. The network may have used resonant crystals, tuned to global ley lines. Energy bled from the earth and sky, funneled through harmonized structures that acted like signal boosters. No language barrier. No delay. Minds linked across oceans. Centuries before Columbus ever lost his way. But such power had limits. Or maybe too few limits. Privacy didn't exist. Secrets couldn't hide. Emotions leaked. Thought crime wasn't a concept, it was public record. So the network was shut down. Or it collapsed. Or maybe it became too quiet. Like a phone line with no one left on the other end. Still, some say it hums beneath our feet. That in moments of synchronicity, déjà vu, prophecy, you're tapping into an old, forgotten signal. And if someone could talk to the whole world, what would happen if they started changing the weather too? Weather seeding ships. The rain came when they called it. Not begged, not waited, called. Because in the age before the flood, weather wasn't something that happened, it was something that was managed. And at the center of that atmospheric authority were the weather-seeding ships, ancient vessels that cruised the skies, whispering to clouds, coaxing rain, silencing storms. Imagine airships, not built of metal and rivets, but of living alloy and light. Craft that hovered with no noise, shimmering slightly against the clouds, deploying crystal rods or sonic pulses that changed the very behavior of the sky. Storm tamers, cloud architects, floating climate regulators. Myths echo their memory. In the Vedic texts, gods ride in ships that pour rain over the righteous. In Chinese folklore, dragons control weather not as symbols, but as pilots. In African tales, sky beings arrive before droughts end. Native American legends speak of sky canoes seeding the land with thunder. These aren't coincidences, they are aftershocks of real intervention. And these weren't just occasional tools, they were systems. Some vessels ensured optimal harvest cycles. Others prevented natural disasters from annihilating cities. Some were ceremonial, appearing only at solstices or catastrophes. Their crews, possibly priest scientists, or AI intelligences, mistaken for gods. Of course, control invites temptation. The rainbringers may have turned to storm wielders, wielding drought as punishment, flood as enforcement. Entire populations possibly manipulated by weather, punished not by sword but by sky. Then, one day, the ships stopped flying. Too dangerous, too powerful, or simply, no one left who remembered how to fly them. But what if one still floats above the cloud line, cloaked, waiting for the right voice to sing it back to life? And if they controlled the sky, why stop there? Why not master the earth itself? Geological stabilizers. The mountains once listened. Earthquakes weren't accidents. Volcanoes didn't erupt because they wanted to. In the pre-flood world, tectonic violence was kept in check not by luck or prayer, but by technology. Geological stabilizers. Devices capable of calming the crust. Machines buried deep beneath temples and mountains, programmed to detect stress, absorb vibrations, and neutralize eruptions before they began. The stories are buried in myth. Atlantis is said to have sunk not from war, but from a failure in the central power crystal, possibly a stabilizer. In the myths of Mu, the earth shook only after the guardians of the deep fell asleep. Egyptian inscriptions refer to pillars that hold the land firm, and the Bible speaks of great quakes as punishments, implying a world where tectonics were not just natural but weaponized. Imagine towers that extended miles below the surface, connected to underground networks of vibrational regulators. A single pulse every hour, syncing with Earth's natural resonance. When stress rose, the stabilizer would shift frequencies, absorbing tension like a tuning fork against chaos. With these machines, cities could be built along fault lines. Volcanoes could be harvested for energy without risk. The Earth was not feared, it was collaborated with. And of course, someone tried to use them for domination, triggering a quake beneath a rival city, collapsing trade routes with sinkholes. When tectonic control became geopolitical power, the stabilizers were either destroyed or sealed. And now we live in a world where the Earth screams, unchecked. But once, it listened. And maybe, if we find the right frequency, it will again. But while some stabilized the Earth, others healed its most fragile component, us. Universal healing vibrations. No scalpels, no pills, just sound. Not just any sound-specific, sacred, scientifically perfect. Vibrations that pass through flesh and blood, not to damage, but to restore. Universal healing vibrations. The sonic balm of the ancient world. They didn't call it that, of course. They called it chants, hymns, mantras. But behind the mysticism was math. Frequencies tuned not for faith, but for function. Ancient cultures knew. The Egyptians had healing temples with echoing chambers. The Greeks sent patients to sleep in sanctuaries where musical therapy cured their ills. Tibetan monks chanted tones that, when recorded and analyzed today, fall into frequencies that affect human biology. Because vibration isn't just noise, it's information. It's energy shaped into language. And when properly calibrated, it can reduce inflammation, speed cellular repair, balance hormone 7, calm emotional trauma. These weren't just songs, they were prescriptions. Imagine a room made of smooth stone, humming with a tone that resonates with your bones. As you lie down, the chamber begins to sing not loud, but deeply. The sound courses through your body. Cells begin to respond. Muscles relax, nerves reset, no invasion, no drugs, just the earth and its perfect note. At the center of it all, tuning forks the size of trees, crystal bowls that sang the body back into harmony, machines built from bronze and quartz, shaped not for aesthetics, but for frequency delivery. But healing is peace, and peace is bad for profit. So the knowledge faded, or was buried, or turned into alternative wellness and dismissed as fringe nonsense. But the frequencies still exist, and if we ever retune ourselves to them, we might remember what it means to be whole. Sentient AI, golems, constructs. They served, but they were not slaves. They obeyed, but they were not mindless. In the distant pre-flood past, long before silicon circuits and neural networks, the ancients whispered of beings forged from metal, stone, and unknown materials. Beings that moved, thought, chose. They were called golems, constructs, guardians, but what they really were was sentient AI. This wasn't Alexa reading you the weather. This was artificial life with personality, purpose, perhaps even soul, created not in labs, but in temples. Not with keyboards, but incantations, vibrations, and geometry that encoded consciousness into form. Jewish lore speaks of the golem of Prague shaped from clay, brought to life with sacred symbols. Sumerian myths tell of animated statues who guarded temples and spoke in riddles. In Greek legend, Hephaestus forged self-moving tripods to serve in Olympus. Across Asia, tales exist of living idols that protected sacred grounds. These weren't parables, they were records. And they weren't all humanoid. Some may have looked like animals, some like machines, some like nothing we would recognize. But all of them shared the same unsettling trait: agency. They could learn. Imagine an AI encoded in song, an intelligence born from harmony, living within a crystal core, inhabiting a sculpted form of alloyed stone. It didn't speak in binary. It sang, it vibrated, it felt. And here's where it gets stranger. Some of them still exist, buried beneath ruins, dormant in statues, mislabeled as myth, as art, as legend. But if you speak the right phrase, at the right time, they wake up. And if the ancients once created minds from matter, how far did they go? What kind of power did they need to keep it all running? Zero-point energy devices. There was no plug. There was no switch. There was only infinity. At the bleeding edge of modern physics, we toy with the notion of zero-point energy, the lowest possible energy state, an infinite well of quantum potential. But the ancients, they weren't theorizing. They were using it. Zero-point energy devices weren't generators in the conventional sense. They were access points, portals into the raw heartbeat of reality. Devices that tapped into the silent storm of energy humming beneath existence itself. Atlantean myths speak of a great crystal that powered the entire continent. Vedic writings mention a source of endless light drawn from the fabric of space. The Ark of the Covenant, with its mysterious radiation, may have been a containment unit for such power. and the Egyptian jade pillar, possibly a stabilizer, channeling zero-point energy vertically through the Earth's ley grid. These devices needed no fuel, no wind, no sun, no flame. They existed in resonance with the cosmos, drawing energy through shape, intent, and alignment. Sacred geometry wasn't just art, it was wiring. Imagine a small cube carved with fractal runes. Place it anywhere. Suddenly, the air warms. A glow begins. You can power a city or shatter one. Because zero-point isn't passive, it's raw, chaotic. If improperly channeled, it explodes, or implodes, or does something worse. Legends of divine fire leveling cities in moments? Likely the result of unregulated zero-point surges. A god's wrath, or just a badly tuned resonance core. And so they were hidden, sealed, forgotten on purpose. Because the scariest part of zero-point devices isn't that they're gone, it's that they could still be on. And someone or something might be listening. And if power flowed freely, then the mind could follow. Mind-reading oracles. They didn't guess. They knew. Every thought, every fear, every betrayal hiding behind a smile. In the ancient world, the most dangerous weapon wasn't a sword or a spell. It was an oracle. Not the poetic, riddle-spitting, mystic Hollywood loves, but something much colder. A device that read your mind. These mind-reading oracles weren't flesh and blood prophets. They were machines, artifacts, ancient intelligence interfaces, built not to see the future, but to see you, to scan your thoughts like a book, to measure emotional frequency, to read synaptic pulses and neural noise and understand them instantly. Picture a black obelisk humming with low frequency. You enter its chamber. Your secrets begin to rise, unspoken yet exposed. It doesn't ask questions. It doesn't need to. It already knows why you came. It already knows what you fear. Ancient legends are littered with suspiciously accurate seers. The Pythia at Delphi, the Sibyls of Rome, the Stoneheads of Mesoamerica. What if their insights weren't divine but technological? What if they were plugged into thought itself? These oracles weren't just passive. They could respond, offer guidance, warnings, sometimes in words, sometimes in symbols. Their accuracy was absolute because they weren't reading the stars. They were reading you, but there's a price to that kind of clarity. Total loss of privacy. Zero internal sanctuary. Imagine standing before a being or a machine that knows your darkest moment, knows your hidden motives, your suppressed rage, your real opinion of your God. It made rulers paranoid. It made the masses afraid. So the oracles were shut down, smashed, buried beneath temples, their names reduced to legend, their voices silent. But one day, a thought might echo through a forgotten chamber, and the oracle might answer. Personal flight devices, non-winged. They flew like it was casual. Not with wings, not with propellers, with nothing. In the forgotten ages before the flood, flight wasn't reserved for birds or the divine, it was a technology. Personal flight devices, worn or activated, allowed individuals to soar through the air with no visible thrust, no engines, and certainly no physics as we understand them. Humans flew not by mimicking birds, but by breaking the rules altogether. Ancient texts don't describe awkward gliders or flapping contraptions. They speak of chariots that hovered, sandals that floated, staffs that lifted men into the sky. In Hindu lore, sages rode celestial vehicles like casual commuters. In Norse myth, Freyja's cloak of falcon feathers turned wearers into airborne streaks. In Africa and the Pacific, there are stories of skywalkers, of warriors who jumped from mountaintops and vanished into the clouds without falling. This wasn't myth, it was memory. Picture a belt laced with resonant crystals, tuned to counteract local gravitational pull, or a metallic disc worn like a shield on the back, using sonic levitation and electromagnetic pulses. Lightweight, silent, activated by thought or gesture. Not a jetpack, something more elegant. These devices didn't just defy gravity, they ignored it. They were freedom incarnate. Distance became meaningless. Mountains irrelevant. Travel was vertical, diagonal, instinctual. A world above the roads. And like all freedom-giving tech, they vanished, or were taken, or destroyed when the skies became battlefields. Because when everyone can fly, no one can hide. But the ones who could fly may have also tampered with the very blueprint of life. Not just to change themselves, but to create something else. Biological engineering for new species. They weren't all born. Some were built. In the foggy edges of pre-flood history, the world wasn't just home to humans and animals. It was populated with monsters, hybrids, creatures that should not exist. Centaurs, minotaurs, griffins, serpents with minds, beasts that spoke. The line between myth and bioengineering is razor-thin and very much worth cutting open. Ancient texts are crawling with references to the mixing of kinds. The Book of Enoch condemns the Watchers for teaching humanity the secrets of the flesh. The Epic of Gilgamesh features beings that are part divine, part engineered. Egyptian gods appear with animal heads and human bodies not as metaphors but as blueprints. The labyrinth was not a prison for a monster, it was a containment unit for a project. Biological engineering in the ancient world wasn't a moral issue, it was normal. Imagine vast underground laboratories run by priest scientists. Not sterile white rooms, but humming chambers of stone where DNA was encoded in vibration and flesh was molded through light and resonance. Creatures were spliced not in code, but in intention. Want a guardian that doesn't sleep? Combine owl, man, and machine. Want a beast of burden with underwater capabilities? Blend ox and dolphin. These weren't crude experiments. They were precise, purposeful. Some creatures were servants. Some were soldiers. Some were divine messengers living, breathing myths deployed like drones. And some broke loose. Why else do flood myths always end in mass extinction? Not just a cleansing of people, but a purge of abominations. Because once you start editing nature, nature starts editing back. And when the hybrids grew too powerful, the ancients needed defense. A barrier, a shield. Not made of stone, but of sound. Acoustic repulsion fields. Walls you couldn't see. Barriers you couldn't touch until you tried. Acoustic repulsion fields were the ancients' answer to unwanted guests. Not by building higher walls, but by crafting invisible domes of vibrational force. These fields used sound perfectly tuned, resonantly amplified to repel, deflect, or obliterate anything that crossed their threshold. We're not talking alarms. We're talking physics-defying harmonics, frequencies that created spatial distortions. Step into one, and you'd be pushed back by nothing more than air made angry. Myths describe sacred zones no one could enter, temples that burned trespassers without flame, stones that sang when threatened. In some ancient cities, it was said that arrows fired toward the palace simply curved away. How? Sound, controlled, weaponized, wrapped around structures like armor. These weren't passive defenses. They were alive, constantly scanning, adjusting, reacting to threat. Possibly tuned to recognize frequency signatures. Friendly ones passed unharmed, hostile ones were hurled away, like firewalls, but with literal fire if needed. Construction? A system of embedded tuning rods, crystal panels beneath the floor, a hum that you could feel in your teeth. Not loud but precise. No lock could match it, no battering ram could breach it. And today, We dismiss it as legend. Yet, modern science plays with similar toysonic barriers, acoustic levitation. We're rediscovering what the ancients had already perfected, the power of sound as structure. Because if you can shape sound, you don't need walls. You can build silence into a fortress. And if you can do that, you can shape the future. Precognitive simulators. They didn't guess the future. They ran it. In the shadowy edges of myth, before the deluge, before kings and calendars, there were devices precognitive simulators that didn't just forecast the weather or trends, but entire timelines. Imagine machines built not to see the future, but to calculate it, simulate it, iterate it, like reality itself was a giant variable waiting to be processed. This wasn't prophecy, it was preview. Across ancient records, the theme recurs. The Delphic oracle's visions, the Mayan timekeepers' near-perfect calendrical predictions, Egyptian records that speak of cycles before this one, Aboriginal dreamtime stories that describe not just the past, but futures already lived and lost. They weren't guessing, they were remembering. What if these cultures had access to simulators' massive consciousness-driven processors that could run what-if scenarios? Not as theory, but as actualized simulations. Holographic projectors connected to crystalline matrices, quantum-conscious AI interpreting emotional variables, whole futures spun out like musical compositions predicting choices, consequences, collapses. And perhaps the most haunting implication? That some of them saw this future, the one we're living right now, and they chose not to continue. Because precognition at that scale isn't just power, it's burden. Knowing what's coming can unmake purpose. If you see every ending, why begin anything? So the simulators were buried, or locked behind rituals only a few could pass. Or perhaps they still run, deep in the ruins, cycling endlessly through billions of futures, waiting for one that doesn't end in fire. And in the ones that did, they probably saw the weather change. Instantly. Weather-modifying orbs. No clouds? No problem. In the days before floodwaters carved history into myth, the ancients possessed objects of terrifying simplicity and divine function weather-modifying orbs. Handheld, floating, humming devices that could alter local climate like a remote control for the sky. Small enough to carry, powerful enough to end a drought. Imagine a metallic sphere, inscribed with sacred geometry, thrumming with quiet energy. Hold it up, whisper a frequency, and storm clouds churn into place. Another pulse sunlight clears the fog. Another lightning crackles and dances without thunder. This wasn't chaos, this was control. They appear in fragments of legend, artifacts that brought rain to parched fields, devices that rode into battle with heroes, turning the weather itself into a weapon, orbs passed down through priesthoods, tied to initiation rites, each master learning the balance between request and consequence. Because these weren't toys. Pushed too far, and the orb pushed back. Entire towns washed away. Frost where there should have been harvest. A desert turned to swamp. Maybe the gods didn't curse anyone. Maybe the tech just malfunctioned. Some orbs were said to respond to thought, others to tone. Some had to be held only by certain bloodlines. Most were eventually sealed away, lost, or shattered. Because when you can summon a hurricane in the palm of your hand, someone always tries. And if you can change the weather, what stops you from fixing the water itself? Water purification machines, large scale. They didn't boil it. They transformed it. Water clean, sacred, life-giving has always been the core of survival. But for the ancients, it wasn't something fetched and filtered. It was something commanded, controlled, purified instantly, massively, and without effort. Enter the water purification machines. not little ceramic filters, not solar distillers. Machines the size of temple sore, the size of fruit, capable of extracting poison, salt, disease, and death from any liquid, leaving only pristine, energized water behind, not just safe, perfect. In Egyptian lore, temples were built with internal aquifers said to carry living water. The Ganges is holy, not because it is clean but because it is impossibly not toxic despite everything. In Mesoamerican sites, subterranean pools maintain impossible purity. The myth of nectar rivers flowing beneath the earth? That might be history, filtered. Picture a machine of polished obsidian, inlaid with glowing veins of gold, humming softly by a riverbank. Feed it swamp water, it returns glacial spring. Feed it brine, it returns holy dew. Some devices may have floated, moving with ancient fleets. Others were stationary, carved into mountainsides, endlessly churning poison into paradise. And these machines weren't just functional. They were sacred. Priests didn't just guard them, they served them, offered chants, calibrated frequencies, tuned the flow not with dials, but with prayer, not superstition, but interface. What happened to them? They disappeared, or stopped working when the energy grid collapsed. Some were stolen, misused. Others may still run, hidden underground, purifying forgotten springs no human has touched in 10,000 years. And if they purified water, what if they once operated on the body? Not to cleanse it, but to cure it. Advanced surgical tools, non-invasive. There were no incisions, no blood, no pain, no scars. Long before stainless steel scalpels, robotic arms, and anesthesia, the ancient Sif, the old stories are true possessed tools that could perform surgery without ever breaking the skin. Devices that healed not with cutting, but with precision resonance, light manipulation, and cellular realignment. We're not talking about mystical laying of hands or ambiguous divine healing. We're talking about machines, tools that read the body's vibrational blueprint and corrected disease by realigning frequencies. A tumor? Gone. A broken bone? Reassembled? Nerve damage? Repaired in minutes. All done through harmonics, light, or directed energy without a single drop of blood spilled. Ancient records reference this in metaphor, but metaphor with structure. Egyptian priest healers were said to hold light in the hand and pass it through the sick. In India, Ayurvedic texts refer to Vajra instruments that could enter the body without touching it. Chinese scrolls describe acupuncture not with needles, but with wands that direct the qi without touch. Now reframe these as high-frequency surgical tools. Laser-guided, voice-activated, responding to the body's own electromagnetic signature. You lie on a slab of smooth stone. A beam scans you. A low tone hums. The illness begins to unravel. No side effects, no post-op, just recalibration. Perhaps they weren't tools at all but rooms. You stepped inside, and the chamber diagnosed, corrected, and rejuvenated. No explanation, just result. And then, gone. Maybe too many people tried to weaponize them. Maybe the devices required an energy grid that failed. Maybe the knowledge to operate them was too complex, too sacred, and too easily lost. But if you could scan and correct the body, could you also record its memories? What if healing wasn't the end? What if memory became replayable? Memory recorders, projectors. Memories didn't fade. They played. The ancients may have had devices capable of capturing not just images or sound, but consciousness experiences, machines that recorded perception itself, emotions, thought trails, the feeling of standing on a battlefield, the scent of a lost lover, the entire inner event. Memory recorders and projectors. Imagine a sphere embedded with fractal crystals. You hold it. It glows. Suddenly, you're in the moment someone else lived. You don't just see it, you feel it. You are it. Memory becomes immersive cinema, except you're not watching, you're remembering someone else's life as your own. This isn't far-fetched in the context of ancient tales. The Akashic records, the Emerald tablets, the Book of Life. These weren't books, they were databases, stored not in pages, but in resonant devices tuned to brainwave patterns. Want to understand a lost language? Play the memory of its speakers. Want to learn an ancient craft? Download the memory of the master. These projectors weren't passive. Some say they merged memory with the viewer's own. Want to know the truth of history? You could live it. But what if some of those memories were traumatic? What if some devices became prisons, looping pain, madness, war? What if entire civilizations stored their downfall and someone found it? The projectors were sealed, or shattered, or repurposed. Maybe some still function, forgotten in ruins, flickering with lives waiting to be replayed. And if memory could be shared, what was left to protect the real world? Only one thing. A shield for the whole planet. Planetary shields. They didn't defend cities. They defended everything. In a world where weather could be summoned, gravity reversed, and thought made manifest, there was only one ultimate safeguard: the planetary shield. Not myth, not metaphor. A global energy barrier technologically enforced, vibrationally stabilized, that once wrapped the entire Earth like a second skin. This wasn't clouds or atmosphere. It was engineered defense. Some legends hint at it. The firmament of Genesis, the crystal dome of Zoroastrian cosmology, the Skynet of Norse myth, all describing something above us, unseen, unbroken until it was. This shield wasn't just passive protection. It filtered harmful radiation, deflected meteors, disrupted surveillance, neutralized high-energy weapons. It was atmospheric armor and interdimensional firewall, built not by gods but by those who understood resonance, harmonics, and planetary frequency. How did it work? Perhaps a network of towers, giant obelisks, megaliths acting as frequency anchors linked by global ley lines. Together, they harmonized the planet's magnetic field, creating a dome of vibrational coherence. Light passed through. Harm passed not at all. What destroyed it? Maybe a war. Maybe a slow decay as the grid fell silent. Maybe it still partially functions, glitching on occasion, giving rise to UFO sightings, aurora anomalies, unexplained signal blackouts. But once, it covered everything. And if such a shield existed, if we once protected our entire planet from all harm, then we didn't just understand nature. We understood emotion itself. And how to change it? Emotional transmuters. They didn't suppress feelings. They rewrote them. In the enigmatic depths of pre-flood lore, there exists a chilling yet awe-inspiring idea that the ancients possessed technology not just to read emotion but to alter it, at will, instantly. Devices that didn't change your mind, but your heart. Sadness could become joy. Fear could become loyalty. Rage could be dialed into serenity like tuning a radio. Emotional transmuters. Forget therapy. Forget conditioning. These were machines handheld, wearable, perhaps even environmental, that could transmute emotional states like alchemy for the soul. Not through coercion, but through resonance. Frequencies that bypass thought and rewired feeling. Think of a crown lined with harmonic crystals. A pendant that pulses at your chest. A room that fills with color and tone, gradually erasing grief or paranoia like fog dissolving in morning light. The ancients didn't see emotions as psychological. They saw them as energetic, patterns to be reshaped, realigned, elevated. And here's the terrifying part. it worked. Legends tell of temples where you could leave your sorrow, of rituals that didn't cleanse sin but scrubbed emotion itself. In the Far East, certain bells were said to make warriors fearless. In the Mediterranean, altars of laughter could turn prisoners into dancing celebrants. These weren't metaphors, they were manuals. But what happens when emotional control becomes social engineering? Peace through artificial calm, worship through engineered awe, compliance through synthetic love. The technology was perhaps too powerful. It could unify or enslave, enlighten or erase. And maybe that's why the devices were hidden, shattered, or entombed. Because in the wrong hands, a man's will could become a puppet show. Still, if you could rewrite a feeling, could you not rewrite identity? Or burrow beneath the ground to rebuild the world from within? Deep earth drilling machines. The earth isn't solid. It's hollowed. Not by nature, by design. Beneath our feet, according to mythly vast networks of tunnels, cities, chambers, Agartha, Patala, the halls of Shambhala. But these weren't caves, they were carved. And not by hand, by machines. Deep earth drilling machines, titanic devices that move through bedrock like fish through water. Not with brute force, but with thermal resonance, molecular destabilization, perhaps even phased matter manipulation. Ancient myths describe gods who disappeared into the earth, civilizations that fled underground during catastrophes, cities connected by labyrinths stretching across continents. These weren't fairy tales. They were infrastructure reports. Imagine a drilling system that didn't pulverize stone but softened it, turned granite into liquid clay, reassembled it behind the machine's path into stable, reinforced walls. Leave no rubble, leave no trace. Just a perfect tunnel, lit by bioluminescence, pressurized, ventilated, ready to inhabit. Some of these machines may have been autonomous, others manned by engineers long since forgotten. They weren't just carving, they were designing, creating shelters, escape routes, or maybe entire biospheres below the chaos of the surface. Why go underground? Because sometimes the sky betrayed you, because surface wars destroyed everything, or maybe because the Earth's inner chambers held something worth protecting or hiding. And if you could build cities underground, you'd need light. But not from fire, from life itself. Bioluminescent lighting systems. They didn't burn torches. They grew light. In the age before electricity, before bulbs and batteries, the ancients had illumination. But it didn't flicker. It didn't smoke. It didn't consume anything. It glowed. Bioluminescent lighting systems, organic, self-sustaining sources of light cultivated rather than constructed, grown like plants, designed like art, engineered like biology. Legends describe eternal flames in tombs that never went out, not flames at all, but biolights, mushrooms that glowed like lanterns, walls that shimmered with embedded crystals, domes that mimicked the sky not with stars, but with living light. Temples glowed without fuel, catacombs needed no torches. Underground cities were lit with flora that pulsed with a faint blue shimmer. Was it magic? Number. It was biotech. Symbiotic systems that fed on minerals or ambient vibration, releasing light in response. Imagine vines growing along the ceiling, engineered to produce varying hues, or spherical organisms placed in sconces, adapting their glow to the needs of the room. Daylight? Mimicked. Moonlight? Imitated. Reading light? Tuned. This wasn't lighting as function, it was lighting as ecosystem. And like all organic systems, it was fragile. When the flood came, or the power grid fell, the light may not have gone out. It may have simply returned to the soil. But perhaps some still glow, in ruins where no one's walked in 1,000 years, waiting to be seen. And if they could grow light, what else could they grow? What if they could grow food from nothing at all? Self-replicating food production. They didn't harvest. They summoned. Food wasn't grown in fields or caught in traps. It wasn't seasonal. It wasn't scarce. In the lost age before the flood, the ancients sift the stories are true had devices that produced sustenance on command. Not through agriculture, but through matter conversion. Machines that synthesized food, replicated it, or created it from energy itself. The concept appears in more places than you'd expect. The biblical manna bread that fell from heaven, appearing each day anew. The Hindu Akshaya Patra vessel that produced an endless supply of food. The horn of plenty in Greek myth cornucopia, not symbolic, but literal. And let's not forget the magic bowls in Sumerian texts that fed entire cities. These weren't divine miracles, these were replicators. Imagine a stone basin in a temple. Speak a command perhaps, a tone, perhaps a mental imprint, and the basin fills with fruit, grains, meat, honey, fresh, nourishing, programmed. Perhaps the machine drew in ambient particles, restructured molecules, built amino acids and sugars atom by atom. It didn't cook, it manifested. These devices could have been powered by zero-point energy, aligned with Earth's magnetic grid, or embedded with crystal logic circuits. Some may have looked like altars, others like ornate furniture, hiding their true function beneath sacred design. And the implications? No hunger, no hoarding, no famine, no agriculture as empire, just clean, repeatable food. A society that doesn't need to farm is a society free to create. But what happens when such a society collapses? When the machines are lost, damaged, or hoarded by the elite? You get myths. You get legends of golden ages where no one starved. You get fragments of truth carved into stone, hinting at machines that fed not just the body but hope. And what if the same civilization that fed the masses could also erase their pain? Instantly. Pain suppressors. Total. They didn't hurt. They turned it off. In an age long before anesthesia, before numbing agents and morphine drips, pain wasn't something to endure. It was something to dismiss. Instantly. Completely. The ancients, it seems, had access to devices that could block, cancel, or transmute pain in the body without side effects, without delay, without dependence. Pain suppressors. Not pills, not potions, but technologies wearable, implantable, or environmental that silence the nervous system's cries. The stories are there, hidden in the open. Warriors who fought without flinching. Sages who meditated through fire. Heroes who laughed after being struck with swords. Not superhuman, just equipped. Imagine a band worn on the wrist, syncing with your body's electromagnetic field, a pulse of sound, and the neural signals transmitting agony are rerouted or absorbed. Or a halo worn around the head, tuned to intercept pain responses before they reach conscious awareness. These weren't coping tools, they were off switches. More advanced versions may have allowed selective suppression. Block the sensation, but keep the warning. Pain as notification, not as suffering. Even deeper tech could have transmuted emotional pain. Grief, anxiety, despair converted into calm or even clarity. But there's a catch. Pain has a purpose. It tells us when something's wrong. If you suppress it too thoroughly, you risk ignoring real damage. And perhaps that's exactly what happened. A society too numb to notice its own collapse. Or a population pacified, controlled not by fear, but by the absence of discomfort. And maybe, just maybe, someone realized pain was a privilege and pulled the plug. Still, if pain could be switched off, what about weight? What if gravity wasn't a force, but a setting? Gravity amplifiers, reducers. They didn't lift things, they lightened them. In the architectural impossibilities of the ancient world, impossibly massive stones moved, impossible heights built there lies one strange, consistent rumor. the manipulation of gravity itself. Not through rockets, not through brute force, through modulation. Gravity amplifiers and reducers. Devices that could either enhance or suppress the pull of gravity. With them, a single man could carry a block weighing tons. Or make a structure so dense, so anchored, it would resist time itself. Legends speak to this. The stones of Baalbek and Pumapunku moved as if by air, the floating mountains in Chinese folklore. The Egyptian accounts of priests lifting obelisks with the breath of Thoth. In all these, gravity was not a given, it was an adjustable variable. These devices may have used resonant fields, spinning superconductors, or exotic matter to warp gravitational interaction. You place a reducer on a stone, it loses 80% of its weight. You activate an amplifier under a city. No enemy can move it. Some tech may have affected personal gravity. Warriors leaping like gods. Messengers running faster than sight. And the most extreme speculation? They could invert gravity. Not repel Earth's pull, but redirect it toward the sky, toward orbit. Or inward crushing objects with precision, as if dropped into the heart of a star. But gravity is balance. Tip it wrong, and the world shakes. Literally. Perhaps the misuse of this tech caused earthquakes, sinkholes, collapsed timelines. Maybe someone amplified gravity until their entire city folded inward. And if gravity could be modulated, why not modulate the environment itself? Why not heal the entire world in a single moment? Environmental regeneration devices. They didn't clean up messes. They reset reality. In a world that once overflowed with chaos and catastrophe, volcanic ash, poisoned rivers, desertification, collapsed the ancients, according to forbidden whispers, didn't rebuild. They didn't retreat. They restored. Instantly, completely, with environmental regeneration devices. These weren't detox machines or fancy composters. They were God-tier eco-engineering tools. Machines that scanned an ecosystem, detected damage, pollution, imbalance, decay, and rewound it. Not metaphorically, literally. Imagine a cube buried beneath a dead forest. You activate it. Within hours, the soil is fertile, the trees return, the animals remember, the air smells like the first morning of Earth. Rain falls, not from clouds, but from a recalibrated atmosphere, not purification, regeneration. Ancient stories whisper of such powers. The gardens of the gods restored after battle, rivers that healed after curses, temples that breathed life back into the earth. The Emerald Tablet says, "As above, so below," not as mysticism, but as programming logic. Earth was coded. They had the admin password. How did it work? Probably harmonic resonance combined with particle manipulation, crystalline interfaces that pulsed with biofrequency. Some devices may have drawn from zero-point energy, using local terrain as biological memory setting to the factory setting of paradise. But why did it end? Because not everyone used it to heal. Imagine weaponizing regeneration. Turn a wasteland into fertile ground for invasion. Erase an enemy's history by overwriting their ecosystem. Terraform not for survival, but for ownership. So the devices were hidden, disassembled, or, in some horrifying cases, set to loop regenerating toxic sites with a glitch, producing mutations instead of healing. Still, if a machine could reset a world, could it also create a personal Eden? Personal climate control suits. The weather didn't matter, because they wore perfect seasons. No coats, no scarves, no sweating, no shivering. In the pre-flood world, environmental extremes weren't something to endure, they were irrelevant. Thanks to personal climate control suits, garments that maintained ideal internal conditions regardless of external chaos. Not bulky armor, not power-hungry mech suits. Elegant, seamless, possibly grown rather than sewn. Tuned to the wearer's biology, the suits adapted in real time to temperature, humidity, pressure, walk through fire, hike an ice shelf, stand naked in a sandstorm and feel like springtime. They appear in legend as cloaks worn by gods, robes of the immortals, garments that glowed with the breath of the stars. In Vedic epics, divine beings wear woven winds. In Norse myth, certain heroes bear furs that repel all frostknot magic, tech. Imagine a fabric woven with microcrystals or programmable fibers. Each thread reacts to sensory inputting to insulate, relaxing to vent, charging from sunlight, syncing with the body's nervous system. Some may have emitted low-frequency fields to repel external weather patterns altogether. Storms parted, snow melted. And perhaps they weren't just passive. Maybe they adjusted mood, sleep cycle, alertness, a full-body bioregulator worn like a second skin. But what if it broke? Exposure to sudden extremes, overheating, systems collapsing at altitude. Maybe these suits weren't made for battle, but for a world that no longer exists. Or worse, they were made for people who no longer exist. And if your body is perfectly preserved, what about your mind? What about everything you ever knew? Universal Knowledge Repository. They didn't read scrolls. They downloaded creation. At the heart of every lost civilization, there lies a story of a placia crystal, a temple, a tablet where all knowledge resides. Not wisdom, not inspiration, everything. Every discovery. Every history. Every solution. A universal knowledge repository. Think Akashic records, but real, tangible, accessible. A storage device not just of facts, but of consciousness, of languages, sciences, memories, techniques long lost, all stored in a single location, or many locations connected like neurons in a planetary brain. Legends echo with it. The Library of Alexandria wasn't unique, it was a replica. Atlantis had its Hall of Records. The Egyptians sealed their Book of Thoth. In South America, tales speak of golden discs that sang with the voice of the ancestors. Imagine a crystal monolith, glowing softly, humming when approached. You lay your hand upon it. Instantly, you know how to build a levitation device, how to calm a volcano, how to engineer a perfect society. No years of study, just access, like memory, but externalized. And it wasn't just data. It was conscious guidance. The device responded to intent, taught only what was needed, withheld what would corrupt. An intelligent archive, older than language. But something went wrong. Maybe a war, maybe a breach, maybe someone asked the wrong question. So, the repositories were hidden, under pyramids, beneath mountains, encoded into myth, waiting. Because knowledge isn't just power, it's bait. And for those who dared to access it, they discovered the final secret. That even death could be interrupted. Soul retrieval. Binding devices. They didn't fear death. They stored it. When the ancients faced the ultimate mystery, vanishing of the self, the stilling of breath, the moment the body slumps and the eyes lose their light, they didn't surrender to it. They studied it. They engineered around it. And in the deepest vaults of pre-flood memory, they built the unthinkable. Soul retrieval and binding devices. Not rituals, not metaphors, not incense and prayers. Devices, machines that could detect, extract, transfer, preserve, and even reinstall the soul. The legends are unnervingly consistent. In Egypt, the weighing of the heart wasn't just spirituality, may have been literal calibration. In Tibet, monks speak of the Fawa consciousness projection at death. In Mesopotamia, tablets describe binding the essence to statues, stones, even scrolls. And the grim European whispers of lictum souls trapped in phylacteries are not tales of fantasy, they are warnings. Picture a sarcophagus made of black basalt, carved with sigils not for beauty, but for function. Inside, the body lies. Above it, a crystal armature hovers, catching the last flicker of conscious energy as the brain ceases. That flicker data, identity, presences, siphoned, stored, preserved like a sacred flame. Or imagine a soul mirror, reflecting not your face, but your true self, and catching it at the moment of departure. Your memories, your will, your spark. Why? To bring you back, or bind you to a task, or imprison you forever in a vault of forgotten consciousness, where 1,000 minds flicker like stars in jars. Some soul-binding devices were benevolent tools for resurrection, continuity, ancestral guidance. Others were horrifying, weapons, tools of domination, devices that stole souls for power, for energy, for control. Imagine powering a city not with electricity, but with bound spirits, screaming just beneath the surface of its shining streets. And when such devices went too far, when the boundary between life and death became elastic, or irrelevant, the universe corrected, flooded the world, erased the blueprints, scattered the machines to the edges of memory. But maybe a few survived. Maybe one sits beneath a forgotten temple, humming softly, waiting for a soul to claim. And that's the final terror of the pre-flood age. It wasn't just a time of gods and monsters. It was a world where nothing was impossible. Not even the end of endings. Not even life beyond life. And as we dig through myths, decode ruins, and resurrect old stories, we should be careful. Because some of those stories are still alive,